Good evening. I'd like to start tonight off with a story. A few weeks ago, my wife and I came home from work, and we started our normal routine. I went off to cook dinner, and she went to attend to some overdue laundry. My daughters, they sat on the couch, texting back and forth between friends and watching TV, just kind of generally hanging out. After a while, my oldest daughter abruptly gets up from her chair and runs off into her room. I didn't think much of it, admittedly, because it's a fairly common occurrence in our household. However, a little while later, our youngest daughter got up and said, "I really need to talk to you. Can you please talk with me?" My wife and I obliged. We put aside our duties and sat down with our daughter, and the first words out of her mouth were, "I have something really important to tell you, but I don't want to get my friend in trouble." Well, that definitely signaled something to my wife and I that we had a serious problem, so we made sure to reassure our daughter that she wasn't going to get anyone in trouble and that we were there to listen. After a few moments of hesitation, she admitted that one of her friends had just texted her and said he was going to kill himself. Well, after we got over the initial shock of the statement, we reached out to the parents of the child and let them know what was going on. They in turn sat down with their son, and it turns out that he had been getting peer pressured from some of his friends at school that he didn't have a girlfriend. So his solution was to reach out to our oldest daughter and ask her out because they're friends. Unfortunately, she rebuffed him. In a moment of panic, he came up with the idea that he was going to threaten to kill himself in order to try and persuade her into a different response. Ultimately, the story has a happy ending. He didn't commit suicide. It wasn't a serious threat. And from our family's perspective, we were able to establish a comfort level in the fact that our daughter was able to understand the criticality of the situation, and she felt comfortable enough to talk to us. As we sat and thought about the idea of teen and adolescent suicide, really got us thinking about what we could do to make sure we stem the issue. So truly, to stem the issue of teen and adolescent suicide, there are two key components. One, being aware of the warning signs, but two, also fostering an environment of open discourse with our children so they feel comfortable bringing their issues to us. Per data analyzed by the American Association of Suicidology from 2015, suicide was the second leading cause of death in the 15 to 24-year-old age group. That was second only to accidental deaths such as car accidents. Also, according to their findings, it was determined that 15 young people per day committed suicide. As you think about it, you may wonder, is suicide limited to a specific gender or race? According to statistics provided in 2016 by childtrends.org, we find that suicide is evenly dispersed amongst both genders and races. As you can see in the graph, the blue being male, the green being female, and across the axis is all of the races. It is a fairly even distribution amongst both genders and races. So as I mentioned, there are two components of dealing with the issue of teen and adolescent suicide. The first is understanding the warning signs. In 2017, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention updated their list of common warning signs. These fall into several different buckets. The first is verbal cues. In our case, the verbal cues were fairly obvious in the fact that their son ended up saying he was going to kill himself. However, these verbal cues are not always that obvious. Sometimes they are more subtle. A couple of different cues to look out for or listen for would be, "I feel like I'm a burden to others," or "I feel trapped," or I don't want to cause any more trouble for the ones I love. Those are all definite verbal indicators that there is a problem. But besides just listening for verbal cues, we have to pay attention to behavior. There are drastic changes in behavior, such as drug and alcohol abuse, but there are also subtle changes in behavior, such as isolation from family and friends. But in addition to these behavioral changes, there is also changes in mood. We often associate depression and sadness with suicide. But in addition to that, a loss of general interest from activities or relationships can be a key indicator. If your child is once actively involved in sports or other activities and then they suddenly recoil from that, that could definitely be a red flag. In addition, irritability and rage can be a very good signifier that there is an issue, and it can signify a cry for help. When I think about understanding the warning signs, I think back to when I was growing up and my little sister had a diary that she would keep under her pillow. If I truly wanted to understand kind of what she was going through at the time, I'd have to break into her diary and read her thoughts. However, as parents these days, with the expansion of social media, we have a much bigger window into our child's lives. Not only can we see it on their faces or watch their mood and mannerisms, we have that window into their Facebook accounts, Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter to really kind of get a feel for what's going on in their lives. And we really should try to take advantage of that. However, understanding the warning signs is not good enough. There is a second component, which is setting a foundation for open discourse with our children. JasonFoundation.com, which is a suicide prevention and awareness organization, publishes several common components that contribute to setting this foundation. The first is to remain calm. It doesn't do anyone any good if you're flying off the handle as soon as you see something going on. By remaining calm, you set a level of comfort that establishes that relationship. The second is being prepared to talk. There's nothing more discouraging to a child than them gaining the courage to come talk to you and then being shut out by an adult. Being prepared to have that difficult discussion is what's going to help facilitate that back and forth and really get to the root of the problem. However, as the old adage says, talk is cheap and actions speak louder than words. You need to be prepared to act. It was great that my wife and I had the discussion with my daughter, but if we were not prepared to act, the outcome could have been much more drastic than what it was. You need to be able to have that discussion, but be able to follow up on it. And then finally, you have to understand you don't have to go at this alone. It's easy for a parent to want to put on a red cape and swoop into action and take care of their children. However, there are organizations and groups out there that are trained and have specific information to help you deal with situations such as this. Reaching out to your children's school, your church group, your local healthcare provider, or other various organizations, there are people with the knowledge to help you get through issues like this. But ultimately, as we think about it, the epidemic of teen and adolescent suicide is real. It can happen to our children. It can happen to the neighbor's children. However, we have the power to stem it and eradicate it. The first key component is awareness. You have to be aware of the signs. You have to be vigilant. The second is setting a foundation for that open discourse. As I think back to the story with my daughter, if she didn't feel comfortable and she hadn't recognized the signs, we could have been dealt with a much more tragic event. You as parents have that ability to have that relationship and stem this issue. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to wish you a good night.